Commander Jake Morrison stood by the large window of his ship and watched the stars. The New Horizon moved slowly through space, far from Earth. Jake had been exploring space for 10 years now, but he still loved looking at the endless darkness, filled with tiny lights. "Sir, we have visitors," said Lieutenant Amy Rodriguez from her station. Her voice was calm, but Jake could hear something different in it. "3 ships just appeared on our sensors. They're not human ships." Jake walked over to Amy's console and looked at the screen. 3 strange ships floated in space near them. They looked like nothing he had ever seen before. The ships were long and thin, with blue lights running along their sides. "Are they trying to talk to us?" Jake asked. "Yes, sir. They're sending a message on multiple channels. It sounds like they want to meet," Amy replied. Jake thought for a moment. Earth had made contact with other species before, but it was still rare. Most aliens they met were friendly, but they had to be careful. "Tell them we'll meet with them. Prepare the main meeting room," Jake ordered. 20 minutes later, Jake sat at a table in the ship's meeting room. With him were Amy Rodriguez and Sergeant Carl Davis, who handled communications. They waited as the alien shuttle docked with their ship. The door opened, and 3 aliens walked in. They were tall and thin, with pale blue skin that seemed to shine in the light. Their leader stepped forward. "I am Ambassador Veltar of the Galactic Coalition," the alien said. His voice was deep but gentle. "Thank you for meeting with us, Commander Morrison." Jake stood up and shook the alien's hand. It felt cold, but not unpleasant. "Welcome aboard the New Horizon, Ambassador. How can we help you?" Veltar sat down across from Jake. The other 2 aliens stood behind him like guards. "Commander, we have studied your species for some time. We know humans are brave and skilled in war. We need your help." "What kind of help?" Jake asked. "There is a war in our galaxy," Veltar explained. "It has been going on for 300 years. An empire called the Vorthans attacks peaceful worlds. They take people as slaves and steal everything valuable from planets. Many species have been destroyed." Amy leaned forward. "How many species are fighting against them?" 47 species are part of our coalition," Veltar answered. "But the Vorthans are very strong. They have better weapons and more ships. Every year, they grow stronger while we grow weaker." Jake listened carefully. He had heard stories about wars in other parts of the galaxy, but Earth had always stayed out of them. "Why do you want humans to help?" "We have watched your people," Veltar said. "You are excellent fighters, but more than that, you think in ways that surprise your enemies. Your military tactics are unlike anything we have seen. We believe humans could help us win this war." Carl Davis spoke up. "What exactly would you want us to do?" "Join our coalition. Send your ships and soldiers to fight the Vorthans. Help us. Free the enslaved worlds," Veltar replied. Jake thought about this. He knew Earth's government had made it very clear that humans should not get involved in alien wars. Earth wanted to explore space and learn about other species, but they did not want to fight battles that were not their own. "Ambassador, I understand your situation is difficult," Jake said slowly. "But Earth has decided to stay neutral in galactic conflicts. We prefer to explore and make friends, not enemies." Veltar looked sad. "Commander, the Vorthans will not stop. They will keep taking worlds until there is nothing left. Eventually, they might come for Earth, too." "Has Earth been threatened?" Amy asked. "Not yet," Veltar admitted. "Your world is far from Vorthan space, but empires like theirs always want more." Jake stood up and walked to the window again. He could see Veltar's ships waiting outside. "Ambassador, I appreciate that you came. To us, I really do. But Earth's position is clear. We will not join this war, even if it means watching innocent species die." Veltar asked, Jake turned around. That's not fair, Ambassador. Every species has to make choices about how to live. Earth has chosen peace. Veltar stood up slowly. I understand, Commander. I hoped you might feel differently, but I respect your decision. Is there anything else we can do to help? Jake asked. Medical supplies, food, things like that. We appreciate the offer, but what we need most is military help, Veltar replied. Still, thank you for listening to us. The aliens prepared to leave. As they walked to the door, Veltar stopped and looked back at Jake. Commander, I hope your people never have to learn what it feels like to lose everything to an enemy like the Vorthans. Peace is a wonderful thing, but sometimes it must be defended. After the aliens left, Jake sat alone in the meeting room. Amy and Carl had gone back to their stations, but Jake needed time to think. Captain Ben Parker came in and sat down next to Jake. How did it go? They want us to join their war against something called the Vorthan Empire, Jake explained. I told them no, like Earth told us to do. Do you think we made the right choice? Ben asked. Jake looked out the window at the alien ships as they prepared to leave. I don't know, Ben. Maybe. Earth believes in peace, and I believe in Earth. But those aliens seemed really scared. Scared aliens asking for help, Ben said quietly. That's not something you see every day. No, it's not, Jake agreed. I just hope we don't regret this decision someday. Dr. Maria Santos walked into the room carrying a datapad. Commander, I've been reading the information the Coalition shared with us. The things the Vorthans do to other species. It's horrible. What do you mean? Jake asked. They don't just conquer worlds, Maria explained. They take the smartest people from each species and force them to work as slaves. Scientists, engineers, doctors. They use their knowledge to make themselves stronger. That's terrible, Ben said. There's more, Maria continued. There was a species called the Kethri. They were peaceful like us, great at mathematics. The Vorthans took their entire civilization and now forced them to calculate star maps and navigation routes. Jake felt sick. The whole civilization? Every single one of them. Men, women, children. All slaves now, Maria said sadly. The room was quiet for a long moment. Finally, Jake stood up. Earth made its choice, he said firmly. We stay out of alien wars. That's final. But as he walked back to the bridge, Jake couldn't stop thinking about the Kethri children. General Zakhthul stood in the command center of his warship and studied the star maps. His red eyes glowed as he looked at the reports from his scouts. The Vorthan Empire had been growing for centuries, but there were always new worlds to conquer. General, we have found something interesting, said his advisor, Captain Mordak. The smaller Vorthan held a datapad in his clawed hands. What is it? Zakhthul asked, without looking away from the maps. Our scouts found the species that refused to help the Coalition. They call themselves humans. Their home world is called Earth. Now Zakhthul turned around. His large frame cast a shadow over Mordak. The ones who said no to the Coalition's request for help? Yes, General. They told the Coalition they wanted to stay peaceful. They will not fight in the war. Zakhthul laughed, a sound like grinding metal. Peaceful species are the easiest to conquer. What do we know about their military strength? Mordak checked his datapad. They have some warships, but not many. Most of their ships are for exploration. They seem more interested in science than war. Perfect, Zakhthul said. If they will not join our enemies, perhaps they will be useful as slaves. What kind of technology do they have? Very advanced, General. Their computers and engines are better than most species we have conquered. Their scientists would be valuable. Workers. Zakhthul walked to the large window and looked out at space. His fleet of 20 ships moved through the darkness like hunting wolves. Send 3 ships to their territory. Find their colonies and research stations. Take what we need and destroy the rest. Make sure they understand what happens to species that think they can ignore the Vorthan Empire. 6 months had passed since Commander Morrison met with the Coalition. The New Horizon was now orbiting Earth's moon, where humans had built a large research station. The Lunar Research Station was home to 300 people who worked on new technologies for space travel. Administrator Kevin Wright managed the station. He was a calm man who had worked in space for 15 years. His 2 children lived with him on the station. Emma was 12 years old and loved to read books about distant planets. Tyler was 10 and wanted to be a starship pilot like his father had been. "Dad, can we watch the Earth rise today?" Emma asked Kevin as they ate breakfast in their small apartment. "Of course, sweetheart," Kevin replied. "Ms. Green said she would bring your whole class to the observation deck." Rachel Green was the children's teacher. She had come to the moon station 2 years ago to teach the families who lived there. She loved showing the children how beautiful Earth looked from space. On the New Horizon, Commander Morrison was meeting with his officers. Lieutenant Rodriguez was giving a report about their patrol of the solar system. "Everything is quiet, sir," Amy said. "No unusual ship movements. The trading ships from Alpha Centauri arrived on schedule yesterday." "Good," Morrison replied. "Any word from Earth about the Coalition situation?" Sergeant Davis checked his messages. President Hamilton sent an update. "The Coalition is still fighting the Vorthans, but Earth will continue to stay neutral." "No change in policy," Morrison nodded. "I still think about Ambassador Veltar sometimes. He seemed like a good person in a bad situation. Do you think we made the right choice, sir?" asked Captain Parker. "I think we made the choice Earth wanted us to make," Morrison answered. "Whether it was right or wrong, only time will tell." At that moment, alarms began ringing throughout the ship. Lieutenant Rodriguez jumped to her station and began reading. "The sensors. Commander, I'm detecting 3 ships approaching the lunar station," she said quickly. "They just appeared out of nowhere. They must have some kind of cloaking device." Morrison ran to look at her screen. 3 long dark ships were moving toward the moon. They did not look like any human ships he had ever seen. "Are they responding to our communications?" Morrison asked. Davis tried to contact the unknown ships. "No response, sir. Wait, they're sending us a message now." "Put it on the main screen," Morrison ordered. The screen flickered, and a face appeared that made Morrison's blood run cold. The alien had red eyes, sharp teeth, and dark scales covering its skin. When it spoke, its voice was full of hate. "Human ship, this is General Zakthil of the Vorthan Empire. Your species chose not to join the Coalition's war against us. This was wise. Now you will serve the Empire as slaves. Surrender immediately, or we will destroy you." Morrison stared at the screen. "This is Commander Morrison of Earth Defense. You are in our territory without permission. Leave immediately, or we will consider this an act of war." Zakthul laughed. "War? You peaceful species do not know war. We will show you what war looks like." The transmission ended. Morrison turned to his crew. "Battle stations. Contact the lunar station and tell them to evacuate immediately." On the lunar station, Administrator Wright received the emergency message. Alarms were ringing throughout the facility as people ran to the escape pods. Wright found his children with Ms. Green and the other students. "Dad, what's happening?" Tyler asked, scared by all the noise. "We have to leave right now," Wright said, picking up both children. "Ms. Green, take the students to Evacuation Bay 3. I'll help the science teams." Wright ran through the station's corridors. Scientists and workers were grabbing important data and rushing to the escape pods. Dr. Helen Brooks, who led the propulsion research team, was trying to save her life's work. "Kevin, Help me carry these data cores, she called out. 20 years of research is in here. Leave it, Helen, Wright said. Your life is more important than data. Back on the New Horizon, Morrison watched in horror as the Vorthan ships moved closer to the lunar station. His ship was fast, but it would take 15 minutes to reach the moon. Amy, how long until the evacuation is complete? He asked. Rodriguez checked her instruments. They need at least 20 minutes, sir. The station has too many people. Can we fight those 3 ships? Morrison asked. We can try, sir, but their ships are much larger than ours, she replied. Morrison made his decision. Set course for the lunar station, maximum speed. We might not be able to stop them, but we can buy time for the evacuation. As the New Horizon raced toward the moon, General Zach Thau prepared his attack. He did not care about taking prisoners or capturing technology. He wanted to send a message to humanity and any other species that thought they could ignore the Vorthan. Empire, target their research station, he ordered. Use the plasma cannons. Destroy everything. The first blast hit the lunar station's main laboratory. The explosion was so bright that people on Earth could see it. Administrator Wright was helping the last group of children into an escape pod when the second blast hit. The pod launched, just as the corridor filled with fire. Wright pushed the children inside, but the explosion caught him before he could get in. The last thing he saw was his children's faces through the pod's window. Commander Morrison arrived just in time to see the lunar station die. 300 people had lived and worked there. Only 60 escape pods had gotten away. The rest were gone, killed by aliens who wanted to teach humans about fear. Sir, the Vorthan ships are leaving, Lieutenant Rodriguez reported. Her voice was shaking. Morrison stared at the burning wreckage of the lunar station. Somewhere in that fire were teachers, scientists, and children. People who had never hurt anyone, who only wanted to learn and explore. Send a message to Earth, Morrison said quietly. Tell President Hamilton that the Vorthans have declared war on humanity. And tell her that they didn't attack soldiers. They attacked families. As the Vorthan ships disappeared into space, General Zakthal was pleased with his work. The humans would remember this lesson. They would know that the Vorthan Empire was not to be ignored, but Zakthil had made a mistake. He thought he was teaching humans about fear. Instead, he had just taught them about hate. President Lisa Hamilton stood in the Oval Office and looked at the pictures on her desk. One showed her daughter playing in the White House garden. Another showed her late husband in his military uniform. Both pictures reminded her why she had to make the hardest decision of her life. The door opened and her chief of staff walked in. Madam President, Congress is ready for your address. The whole world is watching. Hamilton nodded and picked up her speech. She had written it herself, without help from anyone. The words came from her heart, not from a computer or a team of writers. The walk to Congress felt longer than usual. Hamilton could see the anger and sadness in every face she passed. News of the lunar station attack had reached Earth 6 hours ago. The entire planet was in shock. Senator Greg Mitchell met her at the door. Madam President, the people want action. They want revenge. I know, Greg, Hamilton replied. But we must be smart about this. Anger without planning is just destruction. Representative Susan Taylor was waiting inside the chamber. Lisa, are we really ready for a war with aliens? We've never fought anything like this before. Hamilton looked at the packed room. Every seat was filled. People who normally argued about small things were now united by one terrible event. Susan, sometimes war finds you whether you're ready or not. The room became quiet as Hamilton walked to the podium. She looked out at the faces of senators and representatives who would have to vote on what came next. Behind them, cameras carried her words to every corner of Earth. My fellow Americans and citizens of Earth, Hamilton began. Yesterday, 300 of our people were murdered. They were not soldiers. They were not threats to anyone. They were teachers, scientists, engineers, and children. The room was so quiet that Hamilton could hear her own heartbeat. The aliens who killed them wanted to send us a message. They wanted to teach us about fear. They wanted to show us what happens when we ignore their empire. Hamilton paused and looked down at her speech, then set it aside. The words she needed were not written on paper. They were written in her heart. But they made a mistake, she continued. They thought we were weak because we chose peace. They thought we were cowards because we refused to fight their war. They were wrong. Senator Mitchell stood up and began clapping. Soon the entire room was on their feet, applauding and cheering. Hamilton waited for them to sit down before continuing. The Vorthan Empire has declared war on humanity by murdering our civilians. We did not want this war. We tried to stay out of their conflict, but they have forced our hand. Hamilton's voice grew stronger. To the Vorthans, if you are listening to this broadcast, know this. You attacked the wrong species. You killed the wrong people. And now you will learn why Earth has stayed peaceful for so long. It was not because we were weak. It was because we knew what we were capable of. Within hours of the president's speech, things began to change across Earth. Admiral Connor Blake received orders to activate a secret program that most people did not know existed. The Terra Defense Initiative had been quietly building warships for 20 years. Just in case Earth ever needed them, Blake stood on the bridge of the Earth's Vengeance, a massive warship that had been hidden in the asteroid belt. Around him, 12 other ships came online for the first time. These were not exploration vessels like the New Horizon. These were weapons of war. Admiral, all ships report ready for combat, said Captain Nick Carter, Blake's second in command. The crews are angry, sir. They all knew someone on the lunar station. Good, Blake replied. Angry soldiers fight harder. But make sure they stay disciplined. We're not going to act like the Vorthans. We're going to be better than them. At the same time, Colonel Beth Morgan was preparing the first unit of orbital Marines. These were soldiers trained to fight in space and on alien worlds. They had practiced for years, but never thought they would actually need to use their skills. Listen. Up, Morgan told her troops. We're going to war against an enemy that thinks we're soft. They think we're weak because we chose peace. Let's show them how wrong they are. General Peter Stone coordinated the ground forces from his command center. In Colorado, his job was to make sure Earth's defenses were ready in case the Vorthans came back. But he also had to prepare troops to fight on other worlds. We're not just defending Earth anymore, Stone told his staff. We're going to hunt down every Vorthan ship and base. We're going to make them pay for what they did. Dr. Frank Ellis worked in a secret laboratory deep underground. For 10 years, he had been developing weapons that could fight alien technology. His quantum disruptor cannons could punch through any shield the Vorthans had. Sir, the weapons are ready, his assistant told him. We can have them installed on the fleet within a week. Ellis looked at the test results on his computer screen. The weapons were more powerful than anything humans had ever built. Make sure every ship gets them, and double-check the safety. Systems. These weapons are dangerous even to us. Intelligence Chief Laura Adams sat in a dark room filled with computers and screens. Her job was to find out everything she could about the Vorthans. Where were their bases? How many ships did they have? What were their weaknesses? We need to know everything, she told her team. Every ship, every base, every supply route. We're going to hit them where it hurts most. Analyst Simon Clark had been studying the data from the coalition for weeks. Chief, I think I found something. The Vorthans get most of their supplies from 3 main systems. If we could disrupt those supply lines, they would start to weaken. Adams finished. Good work, Simon. Mark those systems as priority targets. As Earth prepared for war, the news of the lunar station attack spread across the galaxy. The coalition received Earth's message with surprise and hope. Ambassador Veltar read the transmission in his office on the coalition capital world. They're really going to fight? Asked his aide. It seems so, Veltar replied. But I fear they do not understand what they are facing. The Vorthans have been fighting for centuries. Humans have been peaceful. What Veltar did not understand was that humans had been studying war for thousands of years, even while choosing peace. Every military academy on Earth taught the history of human conflict. Every general knew the strategies of the greatest military. Minds in History. Commander Morrison received new orders while his ship was still rescuing survivors from the lunar station. He was no longer commanding an exploration vessel. He was now Admiral Morrison, leader of the first human battle fleet. Sir, we have 13 new ships joining us, Lieutenant Rodriguez reported. They're not like any human ships I've ever seen. Morrison looked at the massive warships approaching his position. They were sleek and deadly, built for one purpose, to destroy the enemy. Amy, send a message to Earth. Tell them we're ready to begin operations. What should the message say, sir? Rodriguez asked. Morrison thought about Administrator Wright and his children. He thought about Miss Green and her students. He thought about all the people who had died simply because they existed. Tell them the hunt begins now, Morrison said, quietly, and tell them we will not stop until every Vorthan ship is destroyed or surrendered. Back on Earth, President Hamilton received Morrison's message. She stood in the same office where she had made the decision to go to war. The pictures on her desk reminded her why this war was necessary. Madam President, her aide said, the fleet is ready to depart. Admiral Blake is waiting for final orders. Hamilton picked up her secure phone and called Blake directly. Admiral, you have permission to begin military operations against the Vorthan Empire. Bring our people home. Yes, Madam President, Blake replied. We'll make them regret the day they decided to attack Earth. As the human fleet prepared to leave Earth's solar system, one more message was broadcast across the galaxy. It was short and simple, but every species that heard it understood its meaning. This is Earth. The Vorthan Empire has murdered our civilians and declared war on humanity. We did not seek this conflict, but we will end it. To all peaceful species, stay clear of Vorthan space. We are coming. The age of human peace was over. The age of human justice had begun. Captain Nick Carter stood on the bridge of the Earth's vengeance and watched the Vorthan supply convoy through his ship's sensors. 6 cargo ships moved slowly through space, carrying weapons and food to Vorthan military bases. They thought they were safe in their own territory. They were wrong. All ships, this is Carter, he said into his communicator. Remember, we want the cargo ships intact. We need their supplies and their information. Target their escorts only. Lieutenant Kelly Brooks monitored the enemy communications. Sir, they're sending a distress signal. 3 escort ships are moving to protect the convoy. Let them come, Carter replied. Tracy, are you in position? Commander Tracy Wells answered from her stealth ship, the Silent Strike. Her vessel was invisible to Vorthan sensors, floating just behind the enemy formation. Ready, Captain? We can disable their engines on your command. This was how humans fought. They did not charge into battle like heroes in old stories. They planned every move, studied every target, and struck with perfect timing. The Vorthans were about to learn that humans had been thinking about war for a very long time. Execute! Carter ordered. The battle lasted only 3 minutes. The human ships appeared from behind asteroids and disabled the Vorthen escorts before they could fight back. Wells' team boarded the cargo ships and captured their crews. Not a single human was hurt. What did we get? Carter asked as the prisoners were brought aboard his ship. Major Gary Thompson, leader of the Marine boarding teams, handed Carter a data pad. Food supplies for 3 months, enough weapons for a full battalion, and something very interesting: maps showing Vorthen patrol routes throughout this sector. Carter studied the maps. With this information, we can avoid their patrols and hit their supply lines wherever we want. Good work, Major. This was the pattern that repeated across Vorthen space. Human ships would appear without warning, strike precisely, and disappear. Before reinforcements could arrive, the Vorthens had never faced an enemy like this. General Zach Thule stood in his command center and stared at reports of human attacks. In just 2 months, the humans had destroyed 15 supply convoys, captured 3 military bases, and rescued thousands of slaves from Vorthen prison camps. How is this possible? He demanded. They are just one species. We have been fighting wars for centuries. Captain Mordak looked nervous as he delivered the latest reports. General, they do not fight like other species. They do not try to conquer territory or destroy our main fleets. They attack our weakest points and disappear. Then find their main fleet and destroy it, Sackthol ordered. We cannot find it, General. Their ships are faster than ours, and they have better sensors. Every time we send ships to hunt them, they are already gone. On the liberated world of Kethri Prime, Major Thompson's Marines were helping former slaves rebuild their cities. The Kethri people had been forced to work for the Vorthens for 50 years, calculating navigation routes and building star maps. Think. You, said Elder Vexti, the leader of the Kethri survivors. We thought we would never be free again. Thompson looked at the thin, weak aliens who had been worked almost to death by their captors. We're not done yet. Can you help us understand Vorthen navigation systems? Of course, Vexti replied. We know their routes better than they do. We were forced to plan them. The information from the Kethri was incredibly valuable. They knew where every Vorthen ship would be and when. Admiral Blake used this information to plan even more precise attacks. We can hit their main supply depot at Mortal Station, Blake told his commanders during a secure conference call. The Kethri say it only has light defenses because the Vorthens think it's too far from Coalition space to be attacked. Admiral Morrison, now commanding the Second Fleet, studied the battle plans. What about civilian casualties? Intelligence says there are non-Vorthen workers at the station. We evacuate them first, Blake replied. Wells' team can get them out. Before we attack, we're not the Vorthens. We don't kill innocents. The attack on Mortal Station was the humans' biggest victory yet. Commander Wells and her team used captured Vorthen uniforms to walk right into the station and free the slave workers. When the main fleet arrived, the station was defenseless. Captain Andy Nelson commanded the assault carrier Luna's Revenge. His ship was named after the lunar research station that had been destroyed. Every member of his crew had volunteered to serve on a ship that honored the dead. This is for Administrator Wright and his children, Nelson said, as his ship's weapons destroyed the station's main reactor. This is for Ms. Green and her students. The destruction of Mordal Station sent shockwaves through the Vorthen Empire. The station had been their main source of supplies for 3 entire sectors. Without it, their military bases would start running out of food and weapons within weeks. But the humans were not finished. Dr. Ellis's quantum disruptor weapons had proven so effective that the Vorthens could no longer rely on their shields. Their ships were helpless against human attacks. Sir, we're receiving surrender requests from Vorthen commanders across the border regions. Intelligence Chief Adams reported to Admiral Blake. 12 bases have asked to surrender rather than fight. "Accept their surrenders," Blake ordered. "But make sure they release all their prisoners first. And I want every Vorthan ship in those systems disabled." A war was turning into a rout. Vorthan forces were retreating deeper into their own territory, abandoning outer colonies and military bases. The coalition could hardly believe what was happening. Ambassador Veltar met with human representatives on the liberated world of Altair 7. "Commander Morrison, your people have accomplished in 6 months what we could not do in 6 years. How is this possible?" Morrison looked tired but determined. "Ambassador, we did not want this war. But when someone attacks our children, we do not stop until they can never hurt anyone again." "But your tactics are so different from ours," Veltar said. "We tried to meet the Vorthans in honorable battle, fleet against fleet." "Honor does not win wars," Morrison replied. "Strategy wins wars. We studied the Vorthans, found their weaknesses, and exploited them. Every supply ship we destroyed made them weaker. Every base we captured gave us more information." Colonel Morgan's orbital marines had become legends throughout the galaxy. They could appear anywhere, rescue any prisoners, and disappear before the enemy could respond. The Vorthans had started calling them ghosts because they seemed to be everywhere and nowhere at once. "Ma'am, we have a problem," Sergeant Danny Cox told Morgan as they prepared for their next mission. "The Vorthans are starting to execute prisoners instead of keeping them as slaves." Morgan's face grew dark. "They're trying to deny us intelligence and hurt our morale. It won't work. We'll just have to move faster." The next rescue mission took place on the prison world of Darthel. 3,000 slaves from 12 different species were being held there. The Vorthans had threatened to kill them all if human forces came near. Morgan's response was swift and brutal. Her Marines used teleportation technology to appear directly inside the prison camps. The guards were captured before they could hurt a single prisoner. "This is Colonel Morgan to all Vorthan forces," she broadcast after the rescue. "Every time you threaten innocent lives, we will come for you. Every time you hurt prisoners, we will find you. There is nowhere in the galaxy you can hide from us." General Zakthol received the transmission in his fortress on the Vorthan homeworld. His empire was crumbling around him, but he still believed he could win. He just needed to make the humans angry enough to make a mistake. "Send a message to the human fleet," he ordered. "Tell them that if they do not withdraw from Vorthan space immediately, we will execute every remaining prisoner in the Empire. Millions of lives will be lost." The message reached Admiral Blake within hours. He read it twice, then called an emergency meeting with all his commanders. "Gentlemen, the Vorthans are desperate," he said. "They're threatening to commit genocide if we don't stop our advance. What are your orders, sir?" Admiral Morrison asked. Blake looked at the star map showing human positions throughout Vorthan space. They were within striking distance of the enemy homeworld. The war could be over in weeks. "We don't negotiate with murderers," Blake said firmly. "Send a message to General Zakthol. Tell him that his threats will not stop us. Tell him that every prisoner he kills will be paid for with Vorthan blood." "Sir, what if he actually does it?" Captain Carter asked. "What if he kills millions of people?" Blake was quiet for a moment. "Then he will have proven why the Vorthan Empire must be destroyed completely. And when we capture him, he will face justice for every life he has taken." The final phase of the war was about to begin. The humans had hunted the Vorthans across the galaxy, destroying their supplies and freeing their prisoners. Now it was time to finish what the Vorthans had started when they attacked the lunar research station. The hunt was almost over. General Zakthol stood in his command bunker, deep beneath the surface of the Vorthan homeworld. Above him, human ships filled the sky like angry stars. His empire was finished, but he still had one card left to play. "General, the humans have surrounded the planet, Captain Mordak reported. His voice shook with fear. They have over 100 ships in orbit. Zakthul looked at the screens showing his crumbling empire. In 18 months, the humans had destroyed everything he had built. His fleets were scattered, his bases captured, his supply lines cut. But he could still hurt them one last time. Activate the prison camps, he ordered. If I cannot win this war, I will make sure the humans pay the highest price possible. Sir? That means killing over 2 million prisoners, Mordak said quietly. Do it, Zakthul replied, without emotion. Send a message to the human fleet. Tell them they have 1 hour to surrender, or every prisoner in the Empire dies. In orbit above the Vorthan homeworld, Admiral Blake received the ultimatum aboard. His flagship, the Terra's Wrath. The massive ship was the most powerful vessel humanity had ever built. Its quantum cannon could crack continents, but Blake knew that raw power would not solve this problem. Sir, we're detecting activation signals. From prison camps across the planet, reported Captain Carter. The Vorthans are preparing to execute the prisoners. Blake looked at President Hamilton, who had come aboard for the final battle. Madam President, Zakthul is calling our bluff. What are your orders? Hamilton studied the tactical displays. 2 million innocent lives hung in the balance. But she also knew that giving in to Zakthul's demands would only encourage other tyrants to use the same tactics. Admiral, how long would it take to get our people to all the prison camps? She asked. With conventional transport? Hours. Too long to save everyone, Blake replied. Colonel Morgan stepped forward. Madam President, we have a new technology that might work. Dr. Ellis has been working on quantum teleportation for our Marines. We could send teams directly into the camps. How many teams? Hamilton asked. Every Marine we have, Morgan replied. 3,000 soldiers appearing simultaneously in camps across the planet. But it's risky. We've never tried it on this scale before. President Hamilton thought about the children on the Lunar Research Station. She thought about Administrator Wright and his family. She thought about all the innocent people who had died because one alien thought he could terrorize humanity. Do it, she ordered. Save every life you can. The operation began at exactly noon, local time. 3,000 human Marines disappeared from their ships and appeared inside Vorthan prison camps across the homeworld. It was the largest teleportation operation in galactic history. Colonel Morgan materialized inside the largest camp with 50 of her best soldiers. Vorthan guards were raising their weapons to execute a group of Kethri children when the humans appeared. Stand down, Morgan ordered, her weapon trained on the nearest guard. Drop your weapons and step away from the prisoners. The guards hesitated for a moment, then opened fire. It was a mistake. Morgan's Marines had been fighting Vorthans for 18 months. The battle was over in seconds. Secure the perimeter. Morgan commanded, get these people to safety. Similar scenes played out across the planet. Human Marines appeared in camps, defeated the guards, and began evacuating prisoners. But they could not save everyone. Some camps were too heavily defended. Others executed their prisoners before the Marines could stop them. Report, Admiral Blake demanded as the rescue operations continued. We've secured 60% of the camps, Colonel Morgan reported from the surface. But we're losing people, sir. The Vorthans are fighting hard. Blake made a decision that would change the course of the battle. All fleet units begin bombardment of military targets only. Avoid civilian areas and prison camps. Show the Vorthans that resistance is futile. The human fleet opened fire on Vorthan military installations. The quantum weapons Dr. Ellis had designed tore through enemy defenses like they were made of paper. Within minutes, the Vorthan military was paralyzed. Sir, we're receiving a transmission from General Zakthul, reported Lieutenant Rodriguez. Put him on screen, Blake ordered. The Vorthan general appeared on the main display. His command bunker was shaking from nearby explosions. "Human Admiral, I demand you cease your attack. I still have prisoners. I can still hurt you." "General Zachthul," President Hamilton stepped into view of the camera. "This is President Hamilton of Earth. Your empire is finished. Your fleets are destroyed. Your military is defeated. Surrender now and spare your people further suffering." Zachthul laughed bitterly. "Surrender? To a species of cowards who refuse to fight when asked? I think not. We were never cowards." Hamilton replied calmly, "We simply chose peace over war. But when you murdered our children, you made that choice for us. And now you will face the consequences." The transmission ended. Zachthul looked around his crumbling command center. Half his staff was dead or wounded. The humans were only minutes away from breaking through his defenses. "General, perhaps we should consider surrender," Mordok suggested quietly. Zachthul drew his sidearm and shot his advisor. "The Vorthan Empire does not surrender." Above ground, Colonel Morgan's Marines had linked up with other human forces and were advancing on the main government complex. The Vorthan military had collapsed, but small groups of fanatics continued to fight. "Colonel, we've located General Zachthul's bunker," reported Sergeant Cox. "Heavy defenses, but we can get through." "No," Morgan replied. "Fall back and let the fleet handle it." Admiral Blake received Morgan's request and nodded to his weapons officer. "Target the government complex. Use minimum force necessary to breach their defenses." A single quantum torpedo struck the bunker's main entrance. The explosion was precisely calculated to break through the barriers without causing unnecessary damage to the surrounding area. Human Marines poured through the breach. They found General Zachthul in his command center, wounded but alive. The alien general raised his weapon to fire one last shot, but Sergeant Cox was faster. "It's over," Morgan told the captured general. "Your empire is finished." Zachthul looked up at her with hatred in his eyes. "You think you have won? Other empires will rise. Other species will challenge you. This war proves nothing." "You're wrong," Morgan replied. "This war proves that bullies always lose in the end, and it proves that humanity will never again stand. While innocents suffer." The formal surrender took place 3 days later. Representatives from the Galactic Coalition arrived to witness the end of the Vorthan Empire. Ambassador Veltar could hardly believe what he was seeing. "President Hamilton, your people have accomplished the impossible," he said. "The Coalition has been fighting the Vorthans for 3 centuries. You defeated them in less than 2 years." "We had advantages you did not," Hamilton replied. "We were angry, and we were united. When someone threatens our children, humans become very dangerous." The ceremony was held aboard the Terra's Wrath. General Zachthul and his surviving commanders were brought before a coalition tribunal to face charges of genocide and war crimes. The evidence against them was overwhelming. "General Zachthul," said Judge Carden of the Coalition Supreme Court, "you are charged with the murder of billions of innocent beings across dozens of worlds. How do you plead?" Zachthul said nothing. He had already been broken by his defeat. "Very well," the judge continued. "This tribunal finds you guilty on all charges. You will spend the rest of your life in prison, thinking about the innocent lives you destroyed." After the trial, President Hamilton met privately with Admiral Blake and the other military commanders. They stood on the observation deck of the flagship, looking down at the Vorthan homeworld. "What happens now?" Admiral Morrison asked. "Do we govern their worlds? Do we become an empire ourselves?" "No," Hamilton said firmly. "We help them rebuild as a peaceful society. We make sure they can never threaten anyone again. And then we go home." "The Coalition has asked us to join them permanently," Blake reported. "They want human ships patrolling the galaxy, protecting peaceful species. Hamilton considered this. We'll join them, but on our terms. We won't be their soldiers. We'll be their protectors. When bullies threaten the innocent, they'll have to deal with humanity. 6 months later, Admiral Morrison stood on the bridge of the newly commissioned starship Peaceful Guardian. The ship was part of the Human Galactic Protection Fleet, dedicated to keeping the peace among the stars. "Sir, we're receiving a distress call from the Altair system," Lieutenant Rodriguez reported. "Pirates are attacking a civilian transport." Morrison smiled grimly. "Set course for Altair. Maximum speed. Send a message to the pirates. Tell them they have one chance to surrender before they meet Earth's justice." As the ship jumped to hyperspace, Morrison thought about the children who had died on the Lunar Research Station. Their deaths had not been in vain. Because of their sacrifice, billions of other children across the galaxy would grow up safe from tyrants and bullies. The Vorthans had taught humanity a valuable lesson. Sometimes the only way to preserve peace is to be willing to fight for it. And when Earth fought, Earth won. The inscription on every human warship served as a reminder to all who saw it. We came in peace. You chose war. Never again. The galaxy was a safer place because humanity had finally awakened.